The crystalline vessels of the Vexteri battle fleet hung in Earth's orbit, like shards of frozen lightning, their prismatic hulls refracting sunlight into countless rainbow patterns across the planet's atmosphere. What might have been beautiful under different circumstances now served as a reminder of humanity's precarious position. 37 ships, each larger than anything humans had ever constructed in space, arranged in a perfect hexagonal pattern that spoke of mathematical precision and unwavering discipline. Admiral Zeus Thompson stood before the United Earth Defense Council, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic display showing the alien fleet. He'd spent 40 years in the military, survived 3 wars, and thought he'd seen everything. But this was different. "They're toying with us," he said, his voice carrying across the dead silent chamber. "Their formation isn't tactical. It's theatrical." The massive view screen at the front of the chamber crackled to life, displaying the alien commander. The Vexteri's crystalline exoskeleton caught the light of their ship's interior, creating an almost hypnotic display of colors. Their multiple eye clusters focused on the assembled human leadership with what could only be described as disdain. "Primitive species," the alien's translator rendered its clicking speech into English. "We have observed your civilization for the equivalent of 3 of your Earth months. Your technological advancement is—" A pause, followed by what might have been their version of a laugh, "inadequate for consideration as equals." Council President Maria Santos gripped the edges of her podium, but kept her voice steady. "We are a peaceful species, but we will defend ourselves if necessary." "Defend? With what?" "Your primitive kinetic weapons. Your limited understanding of gravitational manipulation." The Vexteri commander's eye clusters shifted in what anthropologists would later identify as their expression of amusement. "We have conquered species centuries ahead of your development. Your most advanced ships would serve as little more than target practice for our youngest cadets." Thompson felt his jaw clench. The worst part was, they weren't entirely wrong. Earth's most advanced battleships were like rowboats compared to these celestial dreadnoughts. But something about the alien's tone, that absolute certainty of superiority, sparked a memory from his military history studies. "You have 30 of your Earth days," the Vexteri commander continued. "Surrender your world and accept your place as a protectorate of the Empire, or face immediate extinction. We are being generous. Most species receive only 1 day to decide." The chamber erupted in whispered conversations and nervous murmurs, but Thompson stepped forward, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He'd finally placed that memory. It reminded him of British generals discussing colonial troops during the American Revolution. The same dismissive tone, the same absolute certainty of superiority. "Council President," Thompson said clearly, causing the chamber to fall silent. "With your permission, I'd like to respond to our guests." Santos studied him for a moment, noted the glint in his eye, and nodded. Thompson turned to face the alien commander. "We accept your challenge." The Vexteri's crystalline features shifted in what might have been confusion. "You accept your submission?" "No," Thompson smiled, and it wasn't entirely friendly. "We accept your challenge, but we propose different terms. You spoke of your younger cadets needing target practice. Well, we have some experience in education ourselves. Since you've chosen to make this about combat training, we'll be happy to provide some instruction." The alien commander's translator struggled for a moment with what might have been sputtering. "You dare to mock?" "Not mockery," Thompson interrupted. "Promise. You've chosen to make this a lesson in combat. We're simply offering to be the teachers rather than the targets. Your 30-day deadline is acceptable. We'll have our curriculum ready by then." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. President Santos turned to Thompson, her expression a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. "Admiral Thompson, I hope you have something to back up that bravado." Thompson nodded, already reaching for his secure comm unit. "Get me Dr. Emily Blackwood at West Point." Immediately, he turned back to the council. Ladies and gentlemen, if we're going to turn this into a teaching moment, we need the best educator in military history we've got. Dr. Emily Blackwood wasn't supposed to know about the emergency council meeting. She definitely wasn't supposed to have access to their secure feed. But as she often told her students at West Point, the most important tactical advantage is information, and the best time to acquire it is when everyone says you can't. The council's cybersecurity team would later spend weeks trying to figure out how she bypassed their quantum encrypted protocols. They never did crack it, largely because they were looking for sophisticated hacking tools rather than a carefully timed coffee delivery to the right security guard, who happened to be a former student. The massive display screen in the council chamber flickered, replacing the image of the Vex-Terry fleet with Blackwood's face. She sat in what appeared to be her office at West Point, surrounded by artifacts from Earth's military history, everything from Roman gladiators to modern plasma rifles. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, ignoring the immediate uproar, "I apologize for the unconventional entrance, but time is critical, and I have a proposal that can't wait for proper channels." Dr. Blackwood, President Santos managed, recovering quickly, "This is a closed session. Concerning the Vex-Terry ultimatum, yes. Admiral Thompson was about to call me anyway." She nodded to Thompson, who couldn't quite hide his smile. "But we can save 15 minutes of bureaucracy, which gives me more time to explain why we're going to turn this invasion into the galaxy's most expensive teaching seminar." The chamber fell silent. Blackwood took advantage of the moment to pull up a holographic display of her own, showing historical battle formations from Earth's history alongside Vex-Terry fleet configurations. "They're not here to conquer us," she continued, her voice taking on the sharp focus her students knew meant something brilliant and slightly terrifying was coming. "They're here to prove their superiority. This isn't an invasion. It's a hazing ritual. They're the senior class picking on the freshmen." She manipulated the display, highlighting patterns in Vex-Terry ship movements. "Look at their formation. It's needlessly complex, mathematically perfect. They're showing off. Their entire society is built on displays of superiority, which means they're vulnerable to humiliation." Thompson finished, catching on. "Exactly." Blackwood's smile was razor sharp. "They expect us to either cower or fight conventionally. Instead, we're going to educate them. Every engagement becomes a history lesson. Every tactical response comes with cited sources and suggested reading. We'll turn their own psychological warfare against them by treating them like gifted but underprepared students." General Chen stood up, his face flushed. "This is absurd. You want us to fight an alien invasion with homework?" "No, General." Blackwood's eyes gleamed. "I want us to fight them with humanity's greatest weapon, our ability to teach. They're a species that prides themselves on military superiority, yet they're using tactics that any first-year cadet could recognize from historical records. They have technology, but they lack innovation. They have discipline, but they lack adaptability." She pulled up another display, this one showing Earth's defensive capabilities. "We can't match their firepower, but we can destroy something far more valuable to them: their certainty. Every time they attack, they'll learn why studying Earth's military history was worth more than their technological advantages. We'll turn their own propaganda against them by becoming exactly what they claim to be: superior teachers of combat." President Santos leaned forward. "And if they don't play along?" "They have to," Blackwood replied. "Their entire social structure is built on proving superiority. If they refuse to engage with our lessons, they admit weakness. If they engage and fail, they become students by default. Either way, we shift the psychological dynamics of this confrontation." She stood up, her presence somehow filling the room despite coming through a display. "Ladies and gentlemen," they demanded combat. "I say we give them an education that they'll never forget. And if we're going to do this, we need to move fast. I already have a curriculum in mind, starting with a practical demonstration of Hannibal's tactics at Cannae, adapted for space warfare, of course." The council chamber remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Admiral Thompson spoke up. "Dr. Blackwood, how quickly can you get to Washington?" Her smile widened. "Who says I'm not already there?" The Vexteri Advance Fleet approached Earth's lunar colonies with the confidence of apex predators. Their crystalline ships, arranged in a perfect wedge formation, sparkled in the stark sunlight of lunar dawn. They had chosen this first target carefully. A simple show of force against minimally defended outposts, a demonstration of inevitable victory. Captain Lyra Morrison, commanding the apparently retreating Earth defense vessels near Luna Base Alpha, allowed herself a small smile. "All ships, maintain course. Let's show them exactly what Dr. Blackwood taught us about Hannibal's tactics." The Vexteri fleet pressed forward, exactly as predicted. Their tactical algorithms would interpret the human retreat as the obvious response of an inferior force. They didn't even bother with evasive maneuvers. "They're parsing everything through their combat computers," Morrison muttered. "Tactical officer, status of the quantum mines. All in position, Captain. Disguised as lunar debris, just as planned. The Vexteri sensors are registering them as simple titanium fragments." Morrison watched the enemy fleet advance into the carefully prepared killing ground. Dr. Blackwood's voice echoed in her memory from the tactical briefing. Hannibal didn't just trap the Romans at Cannae. He made them think they were winning until the exact moment they were doomed. The Vexteri ships crossed the invisible line. "Execute pattern Carthage," Morrison commanded. The lunar surface erupted. Hidden mining ships, covered in sensor-absorbing materials and buried under moon dust, activated their gravity drives simultaneously. Streams of refined lunar ore, accelerated to near-relativistic speeds, shot up in precisely calculated arcs. The Vexteri fleet, committed to their advance, found themselves caught in a three-dimensional recreation of one of history's most famous double envelopments. "Send the first lesson package," Morrison ordered, watching as the alien ships tried to maneuver in the artificial mineral storm. Their crystalline hulls, so beautiful and imposing, proved remarkably vulnerable to simple kinetic impacts. Throughout the Vexteri fleet, commanders received identical transmissions. Each contained a detailed tactical analysis of the Battle of Cannae, complete with annotated diagrams showing how their own formation had mimicked the Roman army's fatal mistake. Attached were supplementary materials about Hannibal's strategic genius and suggested readings on the importance of studying historical warfare. The alien flagship managed to establish a communication channel. This is an outrage." The Vexteri commander's translator struggled to convey his fury. "You dare to treat this as some kind of instruction?" Morrison activated her video feed, making sure they could see her seated comfortably in her captain's chair. "Commander, you expressed concern about our combat capabilities. We're simply addressing those concerns with practical demonstrations. Your formation showed several critical vulnerabilities that Hannibal exploited against the Romans. Would you like me to elaborate on the tactical parallels?" A particularly large piece of accelerated lunar ore smashed through one of the Vexteri escort vessel's engine arrays. "I've taken the liberty of preparing a detailed analysis of why crystalline hull structures, while aesthetically pleasing, are particularly vulnerable to focused kinetic impacts," Morrison continued pleasantly. "You'll find it in Appendix C of your tactical briefing package. There will be a quiz later." The Vexteri fleet, their perfect formation shattered, began a ragged retreat. Morrison noted with satisfaction that despite their commander's fury, several of the alien ships were already downloading the tactical briefings. "Captain," her tactical officer called out, "I'm detecting encrypted transmissions between the Vexteri vessels. They appear to be discussing the historical references we provided." Morrison nodded. Dr. Blackwood said this would happen. "Pride demands they study our tactics to prove they can counter them. Send the homework assignment." Throughout the retreating alien fleet, commanders received a final transmission. "For next time, prepare a comparative analysis of Hannibal's tactics versus Alexander's hammer and anvil strategy. Consider their potential applications in zero-gravity environments. extra credit for original tactical innovations. As the Vexteri ships disappeared behind lunar orbit, Morrison opened a channel to Earth Command. Phase 1 complete. The students have received their first lesson, though I suspect they're not going to appreciate their grade. The Vexteri High Command dispatched their main battle fleet with enough firepower to glass a continent. 500 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect attack formation, their crystalline hulls darkened to battle configuration. This time, there would be no clever tricks, no educational opportunities, only overwhelming force. Admiral Xarthul, his crystalline carapace still bearing the ceremonial scratches of 90 victories, addressed his fleet. These humans mock our power with their lessons. Today, we teach them the price of such arrogance. In the hidden command center deep within the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Emily Blackwood watched the enemy fleet's approach on a holographic display. Admiral Thompson stood beside her, his face illuminated by the tactical readouts. They've adapted their formation to counter Cannae-style envelopments, Thompson noted. Blackwood nodded, satisfied. Good. They did their homework. Time for them to learn about pop quizzes. She opened a channel to the scattered Earth Defense Fleet. All units, execute Operation Lexington. Across the solar system, small groups of Earth ships began appearing and disappearing, striking at the edges of the Vexteri formation before vanishing into carefully prepared hiding spots. Each attack lasted less than 30 seconds, but each carried a message. Tactical analysis. Your response time to peripheral threats averages 3.2 seconds. Colonial Minutemen achieve faster reaction times with muskets. Must improve. See attached historical documentation. Xarthul's flagship tracked a particularly audacious human vessel that had just disabled 2 of his escorts. Pursue and destroy that ship. I want it. The order died in his throat as the target disappeared into a field of asteroids. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, the human vessels are using the asteroid belt's magnetic fields to mask their signatures. They appear to be employing something called Vietnam Tunnel Warfare Principles adapted for space. Another hit-and-run attack struck their rear guard. This time, the message was accompanied by historical footage. Review materials on General Washington's Delaware River crossing. Note the importance of environmental adaptation in asymmetric warfare. Your fleet's current formation leaves you vulnerable to similar tactical approaches. Throughout the vast battlefield, Earth ships emerged from hiding spots that should have been impossible. They struck from within gas-giant atmospheres, from the shadows of dwarf planets, from clouds of charged particles that scrambled Vexteri sensors. Each attack was accompanied by detailed notes on the historical tactics being employed. They're not even trying to destroy us. Xarthul realized with growing horror. They're grading us. His flagship's computer chimed with another tactical update. Your response to dispersed guerrilla attacks shows improvement. Current grade: C+. To achieve a higher score, review attached materials on Filipino resistance tactics during the 20th century. In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Blackwood watched as the mighty Vexteri fleet began to lose coherence. Individual ship commanders, trying to predict where the next lesson would come from, started breaking formation to protect themselves. They're starting to crack, Thompson observed. Not quite yet, Blackwood replied, activating her command channel. All units, prepare for the final examination. Execute Operation Tea Party. Across the battlefield, every disabled Vexteri ship simultaneously broadcast the complete historical archives of Earth's military history, overriding the fleet's command frequencies. The transmissions included comprehensive analyses of how various guerrilla warfare techniques had been adapted for space combat, complete with efficiency ratings and suggested improvements. The Vexteri fleet, their rigid command structure drowning in a flood of tactical data, began to fragment. Some ships maintained formation, others broke away to hunt the elusive Earth vessels, and a few simply stopped, their commanders apparently absorbed in studying the historical materials. Admiral Xarthul watched his perfect battle plan dissolve into chaos, His command screen flashed with one final message. Congratulations on completing today's practical examination. For next week's lesson, an analysis of how pride and technological superiority contributed to historical military catastrophes. Warning: pop quizzes may occur at any time. The mighty Vex-Terry Admiral, veteran of 100 victories, found himself doing something unprecedented, taking notes. Junior Commander Relvax sat in his quarters aboard the Vex-Terry Dreadnought Eternal Victory, poring over the human tactical documents for the 7th time. His crystalline fingers traced the battle diagrams of ancient Earth conflicts, mind racing with possibilities. The humans called this particular technique the Fabian strategy, wearing down a superior force through attrition and carefully chosen engagements. A priority alert flashed across his screen. Another human attack was imminent. But something felt different this time. The movement patterns, they weren't random. They matched something he'd just studied. All ships, maintain formation. Admiral Xarthel's orders boomed through the command channel. Prepare for. Begging command's pardon. Relvax interrupted, committing what would once have been an unthinkable breach of protocol. The humans are recreating Fabius Maximus's tactics against Hannibal. Their apparent retreat is designed to draw us into. He transmitted his analysis, showing predicted human ship movements based on historical patterns. The command channel went silent. The human attack came exactly where Relvax had predicted. For the first time, the Vex-Terry fleet was ready. They countered the Earth ships' maneuvers perfectly, forcing them to retreat. The victory should have felt triumphant. Instead, Relvax's quarters were suddenly flooded with encrypted messages from other junior officers throughout the fleet. How did you know? Which historical archive has the best tactical analyses? Can you share your notes on ancient Roman strategy? In the Rocky Mountain Command Center, Dr. Blackwood watched the engagement replay with a satisfied smile. They're starting to learn. More importantly, they're starting to teach each other. Admiral Thompson raised an eyebrow. You planned for this. The Vex-Terry hierarchy is too rigid to adapt quickly, Blackwood explained. But they're junior officers, the ones with the most to prove and the least to lose. They're our real target audience. Across the Vex-Terry fleet, an unprecedented phenomenon was spreading. Junior officers were forming unofficial study groups, analyzing human military history with growing fascination. They traded notes on everything from ancient Chinese Sun Tzu principles to modern orbital defense theory. Relvax found himself at the center of this quiet revolution. His quarters became a virtual classroom as officers secretly shared insights and strategies. They weren't just studying to survive anymore. They were genuinely intrigued by humanity's martial evolution. Look at this. A colleague's encrypted message highlighted passages from Earth's World War II Pacific theater. Their inferior naval forces developed night fighting tactics that neutralized technological advantages. We could adapt this for asteroid field combat. The breakthrough came during the next major engagement. A group of Earth ships emerged from Jupiter's radiation belts, using the electromagnetic interference as cover. But this time, multiple Vex-Terry vessels responded with coordinated counter-tactics derived from various Earth naval strategies. To everyone's surprise, the human commander opened a channel. Captain Sarah Martinez's hologram appeared on their bridges, smiling. Excellent adaptation of Admiral Halsey's weather tactics. Your coordination shows remarkable improvement. Would you be interested in a detailed analysis of your performance? The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time, a Vex-Terry junior officer, Relvax, responded directly to a human commander. We would appreciate that tactical assessment, Captain. In the hours that followed, something unprecedented occurred. Human and Vex-Terry officers engaged in a detailed discussion of military strategy. Questions were asked, answers were given, theories were debated. High Command was horrified. Orders went out immediately to cease all unauthorized communication with the humans. But it was too late. The seeds of change had been planted. That evening, Relvax received one final encrypted message, This one from Dr. Blackwood herself. Congratulations on your outstanding progress. Would you be interested in a more formal educational opportunity? Earth's military academies are considering an exchange program. He stared at the message for a long time, his crystalline form reflecting the screen's light. Everything he'd been taught said this was treason. Everything he'd learned said it was an opportunity. Relvax began composing his reply. Welcome to Earth's Military History and Tactical Studies Academy. Dr. Blackwood stood at the podium of the hastily converted particle physics facility in Geneva, addressing the most unusual freshman class in human history. 30 Vexteri officers, led by Relvax, sat alongside human military personnel. The crystalline aliens had smuggled themselves out of their fleet in supply ships, maintenance vessels, and even a few stolen shuttles. Each carried with them archived copies of Earth's tactical lessons, studied in secret during the ongoing conflict. I must admit, Blackwood continued, a slight smile playing at her lips, this is the first time we've had students defect from an actively invading force to attend classes. A ripple of what humans would learn to recognize as Vexteri laughter moved through the alien contingent. Their crystalline forms caught the morning sunlight streaming through the windows, creating dancing patterns on the walls. Relvax raised his hand, another human gesture the defectors had eagerly adopted. Doctor, High Command has branded us traitors. They claim we've been, what is your phrase? Drinking the Kool-Aid. That's not quite the correct usage of that idiom, Blackwood replied, and I believe it will be covered in Professor Chen's Human Cultural References in Military Context class next semester. The room's mood shifted as emergency alerts flashed across everyone's devices. Admiral Thompson's hologram materialized beside Blackwood. We've got movement, he reported. The Vexteri fleet is mobilizing. Looks like they finally decided to respond to the defections. Blackwood turned to her unusual class. Well, students, it seems we're going to have an early practical exam. Show me what you've learned about defending against your own tactics. What followed was perhaps the most unusual battle in human military history. The Vexteri attack fleet found themselves facing a combined force of Earth ships and defector-piloted vessels. But more devastating than any weapon was the psychological warfare employed by the Academy's students. Every Vexteri attack run was met with detailed analytical critiques. Defector ships transmitted real-time tactical assessments to their former comrades, complete with historical references and suggested improvements. The Academy's first graduating class was conducting their thesis defense in the middle of a space battle. Your approach vector mirrors the British at Jutland, Relvax transmitted to his former fleet commander. Chapter 7 in the Advanced Naval Warfare text clearly demonstrates why that's suboptimal in a three-dimensional battle space. Might I suggest reviewing the Jutland case study? I'd be happy to provide my class notes. The effect was devastating. More ships began breaking formation, their commanders requesting tactical consultations that turned into impromptu enrollment interviews. The rigid hierarchy of the Vexteri military structure crumbled in the face of peer-reviewed criticism and offered scholarship opportunities. In the Academy's makeshift command center, Blackwood watched the battle unfold with professional satisfaction. Notice how they're applying combined theoretical frameworks, she commented to Thompson. That's a classic Clausewitz maneuver modified with Sun Tzu principles. I'm definitely giving extra credit for that. The battle ended not with a decisive victory, but with an unprecedented mass enrollment. Over 200 Vexteri ships declared their intention to pursue further educational opportunities. The remaining fleet, faced with the prospect of fighting opponents who could quote their own tactical doctrine better than they could, withdrew to reassess strategic priorities. That evening, as human and Vexteri students gathered in the Academy's dining hall, Relvax approached Blackwood with a curious question. Doctor, in studying your history, we noticed something peculiar. Your species often turned former enemies into your strongest allies. Was this your plan from the beginning? Blackwood smiled. The best teachers, Relvax, know that every student has the potential to surpass their instructor. We didn't want to defeat the Vexteri fleet, We wanted to teach it to become something better. She gestured to the mixed groups of humans and aliens engaged in animated tactical discussions. Look around. You're not just learning our military history. You're helping us write the next chapter of it. And what chapter is that, Doctor? The one where we learn from each other. The graduation ceremony of Earth's Military History and Tactical Studies Academy's first class was broadcast across both human and Vexteri space. Dr. Blackwood stood proudly as Relvax delivered the valedictorian address, his crystalline form gleaming under the lights of the Geneva Convention Center. In our arrogance, he began, we thought we came to Earth to teach humanity its place in the galaxy. Instead, we learned something far more valuable, that true strength lies not in superiority, but in the ability to learn from those we once considered beneath us. In Vexteri space, the broadcast was meant to be blocked. Instead, it appeared on every screen, the work of a shadow network of Academy-trained information warfare specialists. The revolution wasn't fought with weapons, but with lesson plans and course catalogs. Admiral Thompson, seated beside Blackwood, leaned over and whispered, "Did you know your students were planning this?" "Admiral," she replied with a slight smile, "where do you think they learned about the importance of information distribution in revolutionary warfare?" It was covered in Professor Martinez's Digital Age Conflict seminar last semester. Across Vexteri territory, the effects were immediate and irreversible. The graduating class had prepared their thesis projects well. Each graduate transmitted comprehensive reform proposals to their home territories, backed by historical case studies of successful societal transformations. From the French Revolution to the digital age, from ancient Rome's transition to a republic to modern Earth's unified defense council, every example was meticulously documented and adapted for Vexteri society. The old guard never stood a chance against peer-reviewed papers and properly cited sources. High Command attempted to dismiss the graduates as traitors, only to face an unprecedented challenge. Public debates. Young Vexteri officers demanded their leaders defend their positions with properly formatted arguments and supporting evidence. When they couldn't, their authority crumbled. Your traditional power structure lacks adequate checks and balances, one graduate argued in a public forum. As demonstrated in Earth's Constitutional Convention of 1787, a system of divided powers provides greater stability. I've prepared a slideshow presentation with relevant historical examples. The revolution spread through study groups and academic conferences. Military bases transformed into satellite campuses. Battle fleets became mobile libraries. The rigid crystalline hierarchy of Vexteri society began to fracture and reform into something new, a meritocracy based on knowledge rather than force. Back on Earth, Relvax concluded his speech with words that would be quoted in history books for generations. We came as conquerors, became students, and emerge as something greater, teachers ourselves. The Vexteri Empire dies today, but the Vexteri Federation of Learning rises in its place. The applause that followed came from both humans and Vexteri, their different physiologies creating a unique harmony of sounds. After the ceremony, Dr. Blackwood found herself in her office, surrounded by her graduating class. They had one final question. "Doctor," Relvax asked, his crystalline form reflecting the evening light, "our society is transforming faster than we anticipated. We need more teachers." Blackwood finished for him. "You need educators who understand both Earth's history and Vexteri culture." She turned to her computer and pulled up a new curriculum proposal, which is why I've already prepared the Advanced Educational Exchange Program. Your next mission, graduates, is to teach the next generation of both our species. The proposal outlined a revolutionary idea: joint human Vexteri teaching teams, traveling throughout both species' territories, combining military history with cultural understanding and diplomatic relations. After all, Blackwood added with a knowing smile, the best way to truly learn something is to teach it. Her students finished in unison, a phrase that had become their unofficial motto. As her graduates left to begin their new missions as educators, Blackwood looked out her window at the Geneva evening. Somewhere up there, the remaining Vexteri fleet was probably receiving their first homework assignments from her newly minted teachers. She almost felt sorry for them. Almost. 10 years after the first Vexteri ships darkened Earth's skies, the Galactic Institute of Military History and Peace Studies held its first multi-species graduation ceremony. The Geneva campus, once a hastily converted physics facility, now sprawled across the city, its crystalline and steel architecture reflecting the merged aesthetics of both founding species. Dr. Emily Blackwood, her hair now streaked with silver, stood at the familiar podium. Before her sat graduating students from 17 different species, each drawn to Earth, not by fear or force, but by an insatiable desire to learn. When we first established this institution, she began, some called it a desperate gambit. Others called it madness. One particularly dramatic Vexteri admiral called it the most elaborate surrender ceremony in history. She paused as knowing laughter rippled through the audience. That admiral, I'm pleased to note, is now our Dean of Theoretical Combat Studies. In the front row, Admiral Xarthol's crystalline form shimmered with what humans had learned to recognize as embarrassed pride. His transition from hardened warrior to passionate educator had become required reading in the Case Studies in Personal Growth course. Today, Blackwood continued, we celebrate not just our graduates, but a fundamental shift in how species interact. The Great Lesson, as it's now known, proved that the strongest weapon in any civilization's arsenal is not their technology, not their military might, but their ability to teach, and more importantly, their willingness to learn. The ceremony's keynote address was delivered jointly by Relvax, now the Federation's Chief Educational Officer, and Commander Iris Blackwood, Emily's daughter, who had grown up alongside the first Vexteri students. Their presentation, Adaptive Teaching Methodologies in Multi-Species Combat Prevention, received a standing ovation from all appendages capable of standing. We've come a long way from emergency tactical lessons transmitted to hostile ships, Iris noted during their speech. Though I must say, Father still occasionally grades my tactical decisions at family dinners. The revelation of Relvax and Iris's marriage 3 years ago had made headlines across known space. Their daughter, Crystal, was the first human Vexteri hybrid, her unique biology leading to breakthroughs in both medical science and sinological studies. After the ceremony, during the reception in the Institute's Grand Hall, Dr. Blackwood found herself surrounded by her original students. Relvax raised a glass in a gesture he'd learned a decade ago. To the professor who taught an empire to question itself, he toasted. To the students who dared to learn, she countered, then added with a mischievous smile, and who still owe me that paper on the psychological impact of homework on invading forces. The gathering was interrupted by breaking news. Another aggressive species had been detected approaching Allied space. The newcomers' transmissions bore the familiar hallmarks of technological superiority and military arrogance. Should we be concerned? Admiral Thompson asked, joining the group. Dr. Blackwood shared a knowing look with her former students. On the contrary, Admiral, I believe we've just identified our next class of potential students. She turned to the assembled graduates. Who's ready to teach? The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Plans were already being drafted, reading lists compiled, and teaching strategies developed. The new species would soon learn what the Vexteri had discovered. That Earth's greatest weapon was not its ships or its soldiers, but its endless capacity to turn enemies into students and students into friends. As the evening wound down, Dr. Blackwood stood at her office window, watching human and alien students mingling in the courtyard below. Crystal, her granddaughter, was explaining Earth games to a group of newly arrived alien students, her crystalline-flecked skin catching the sunset. You know, Relvax said, joining her at the window, the old Vexteri military manuals had a saying, victory is achieved when the enemy submits to superior force. And now, Blackwood asked, now we know better. Victory is achieved when there are no more enemies, only fellow students eager to learn. In the distance, a ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, carrying the advanced diplomatic team to meet the newly discovered species. On its hull, written in multiple languages, was the Institute's motto: through understanding, peace; through peace, progress; through progress, unity. The next class was about to begin.